Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Tzveta Baliyska, and I'm joining you from Bulgaria. Some of you might know me as the organizer and host of the first international online playback theater conference in 2020, and later at the European Playback Theater Gathering in Sofia Live in 2022. I'm also founder of Playback Theater Here and Now and co-founder of Balkan Playback Theater School affiliated to Center for Playback Theater. This year, the next European gathering will take place from 2nd to 5th October in Salamanca, Spain, as part of the official 50-year celebrations. Don't wait too long to register. It promises to be meaningful and inspiring. I'm also a member of the board of the Center for Playback Theater Directors, and I have the great honor of coordinating the global celebrations for 50 years of playback theater. The Center for Playback Theater, founded by Jonathan Fox, is the main institution that supports the development and quality of playback theater training all around the world. It holds the accreditation system for trainers and schools, supports research and new initiatives, and cultivates global artistic standards and ethics in the field. Our close partner in this celebration is the International Playback Theatre Network, IPTN, the organization that connects and amplifies the work of companies and practitioners worldwide. IPTN runs international gatherings, shares resources, and supports emerging communities across continents. As part of this milestone year, Center for Playback Theatre, CPT, is organizing a year-long international celebrations, including a series of live interviews with founders and pioneers of playback theater like today's session, online peer supervisions with trainers and practitioners from all around the world, the invitation to all playback theater companies globally to create performances on the same theme, stories that shaped us, in honor of the 50th anniversary. It is locally, so you can register and we will share all the pictures and events that will perform in this topic. Listening Hour, which was initiated by Jonathan Fox 5 years ago and has since grown into a worldwide practice held by many trained facilitators. Our guest today, one of our guests today, Persia Wildwood, is an authorized facilitator. And of course, our big global playback birthday celebration on 10th of November. This is the month of the very first playback theater rehearsal in 1975. All events are free and open for registration. You can find them in our site, playbackcenter.org, and also in Facebook, Center for Playback Theater, and Instagram, Center for Playback Theater. You can also support all the events this year's Center for Playback Theater is doing, and you will find the link for donation also in the chat. Today, we are honored to be in conversation with Bev Hosking and Persia Wildwood, two remarkable artists and long-time practitioners whose contributions have deeply enriched playback theater in Oceania and beyond. But before I invite them, I want to acknowledge the teams that make all these events possible. Board of the Center for Playback Theater, Beata Shomuji, Igor Lubitov, Radhika Jain, Shikant Chang, Deborah Scott, Damilola Potieri, Sulinda Kash, Sheila Donio, Mina Mo, and myself, and our partners from International Playback Theater Network IPTN, Andrea Sandoval, Emily Smith, Roberta Roberto, Ferran Luengo, Shirei Halei, and Hani Aurostum. Take some technical notes before we begin. This session is being recorded and will be published. By attending, you consent to this. Please keep your microphone and camera off during the interview. During the Q&A moment, you are welcome to turn your camera on. To ask questions, write in the Zoom chat or raise your hand. After the breakout rooms, you will have possibility to come live to ask questions. But before that, please put in the Zoom chat, and our technical support will provide these questions to me, and I will provide them to our speakers. You can enable automatic translations by clicking Show Translations in a translation button down below. It is automatic translation, so maybe it's not perfect, but maybe it will help. Our technical support today, it is from Bea Shomuji from Hungary and Damielola Potieri from Nigeria. Thank you so much for supporting this event, and feel free to message them in the chat if you need any support. So now, with joy and deep respect, please join me in welcoming our speakers, Bev Hosking from Aotearoa, New Zealand, director, performer, trainer, and former IPTN president, who has been at the heart of playback theatre in community education and psychodrama fields. Bev, please welcome. Hello. And also, I want to welcome Persia Wildwood from Australia, artist, educator, musician, and co-founder of Bellingham Playback Theatre, bringing the voice of poetic storytelling and community performance from Australia. So welcome, welcome, and so happy to be with you today.
Thank you.
So if you wish, before I start with the questions, you can say something about yourself or some words to people that are here, and then I will ask you the first question.
I'll go first. I just want to say it's a great delight to be here. It's a little bit overwhelming, but very, very happy to be part of this event. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you here from the land of the Gumbaynggirr people, which is the area where I live is on the unceded lands of the Gumbaynggirr people, members of the oldest living Indigenous culture in our world today. I'd also just like to say that for those of you who don't know where Bellingen is, if you have some sense of Australia, the East Coast, we're about halfway between Brisbane and Sydney. And we're near the coast, but we're in a valley. So yeah, great to be here. Lovely to be here with you, Bev. Yeah, that's me.
Great to see you again, Persia, and everybody else. There's so many faces popping up. I was looking, I saw some of you who I know and haven't seen for a long time, so it's wonderful to be here with you, even just to see you in one of those small square boxes on the screen.
Yeah.
As I start, and as I've been reflecting and preparing for this interview, I want to pay tribute to Jonathan and Joe, who have, and the original company who invented this form and who've been very influential to me in my life, and other trainers, Francis Batten, Max Clayton, Mary Good, Bridget Brandon, Deborah Pearson. These are some people from our part of the world who have been very influential for me, and I think have enabled me to live a life beyond anything that I would have dreamed for myself. I also want to pay tribute to the company members in the Wellington companies that I've led, and the Sydney company I was with for a few years. It's one of the most wonderful things to have my life and our lives witnessed by each other through the telling of our stories, meeting regularly for Monday nights over 15 years. That's been a great gift to me. And then there have been the tellers who've made that long journey from the audience to the teller's chair and been willing to share their stories. I've always felt without them, we can't do the work, and without us, they can't share their stories. So it's such a great relationship. And then there are all the people, colleagues and people I've trained over many years. I think I have learned more than I've ever taught. So thank you to all of you.
Great. I want to say that the interviews with Joe Salas and Jonathan Fox are already in internet in our YouTube channel. So if someone is interested and haven't seen them yet, they are there. Years of Playback Theatre in YouTube. You can enjoy Joe and Jonathan's interviews. So I will start with the first question. How did each of you first encounter playback theatre, and what was happening in your life or community at that time? Persia?
Yeah, I'll respond to that by painting a picture. I was in my early 30s. It was the early 80s, and I was on leave from my work at the time as a teacher of languages, French and Indonesian, and I happened to be doing laps in a pool at the University of New South Wales, and I noticed a poster that said circus skills training, 1 week of circus skills training. I'd done gymnastics as a kid, but I'd never done circus skills. But I just knew I had to go. And I went, I loved it. And somehow that led me to the amazing Drama Action Centre, or DAC, as it was referred to. And I landed in doing courses with Frances Batten, with Bridget Brandon, and I must add that the circus skills training was with Richard Moss, and it all seemed like such a wonderful new world. And there was commedia, there was voice training, all sorts of different experiences. And yeah, they were my first contacts with playback. And I felt like I just walked into a whole new world. So it was life-changing for me. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And Bev, with you?
I got a phone call from a friend and colleague who I knew through psychodrama training. I was in the early stages of my psychodrama training, and I got a phone call asking me if I would organize a training workshop for a group of people who were coming to Australia and New Zealand to teach playback theatre. This is in 1980. And I had been organising a number of different workshops in creative movement, improvised theatre with Frances Batten, Bridget Brandon, Deborah, Mary. And so I said, they described what it was. I said, this sounded fantastic. And so I said yes. And so I organised the workshop in Wellington, and the four, Jonathan, Joe, Judy Swallow and Michael Clemente came to Wellington, and they ran a 4-day workshop in Wellington. And then on the last night, we performed in a local theatre, which was, a bit hairy after 3 days of training, along with them as the actors, was pretty exciting. And at that time, I was working in the community with young, disadvantaged Māori and Pacific Island young people. And I organised a performance for Joe and Jonathan and Judy and Michael to perform to a group of young people out in the area where I was working. And the organisation that was had were interested in this performance, they said they wanted it a closed performance, so I didn't get to see the performance. I believe it was extremely difficult, but it sowed a seed. And in 1982, I invited Bridget Brandon to come and run another playback workshop, and later that year started a playback company in Wellington. We went for 18 months. Then I went to Sydney to do some more training, and then and worked with the Sydney company for a number of years, and then came back to New Zealand and started the Wellington company in 1987. So I was there at the very beginning when they landed, and in the different places where that group travelled, sort of playback companies sprang up, and in New Zealand after that visit, other companies also sprang up. It was the heyday of playback theatre in New Zealand between sort of 82 till about 1990, and then things calmed down a little.
In those early years, can you describe how it looked and felt in your region, both of you, and what were like the early performances or trainings?
So I left Sydney and travelled north to make my home in Bellingen in 1984, and I kept going back though to the Drama Action Centre and doing classes and courses there. And then Bridget Brandon came up to Bellingen and ran a clowning workshop in Bellingen. So we formed the Bellingen Company of Clowns out of that. And then at this time, Bellingen was a sort of, it's a small town, 4,000 people, but a very creative town. And in those days, there were lots and lots of musicians, dancers, all sorts of people doing all sorts of different things. There were a lot of people who were resettling into alternative communities, so-called hippies. And it was a very lively, fertile township, and in fact, broader than the township itself. It was like a hub of creative life. And we used to have these, we had a group that was called show-offs, and the structure of show-offs was that we'd perform something every month in the Memorial Hall, which was the big hall in Bellingen, in the centre of town. And the way it worked was you picked 5 names out of a hat to create little groups. And with that group, you had to come up with something and do that for the next month's performance. And so I was in a group with 3 dancers and a musician. So we had the idea to have a go at doing a playback theatre performance. This is in September 1989. And it worked. And somehow it worked. And so by November, which was the same month when the Berlin Wall came down, we decided to actually form Bellingen Playback Theatre Company. And yeah, it was very much learning on the job. We had performances in restaurants, which we learned were not a good idea. We had performances that were outdoors. We were attracting new members by putting up posters around town. That was our method of recruitment for new members, and training was simply a matter of joining the company and learning as you sort of went along. But it kept working. And we had Sue Grant come up in 1992 from Sydney, and she ran a 2-day workshop. Hello, Sue, good friend. And we also, at that time, there was a playback theatre company up in Lismore, which is about 3 hours north. So we went up to watch their performances. And one of the earliest performances I remember was in a field out the back of the old butter factory in Bellingen, just this big open field. It was an International Women's Day celebration performance that we did. We had no lighting, we just had candles, and we had these double bed sheets that we'd made as a sort of backdrop, and we put the candles behind the backdrop, and at one point the whole thing caught fire, and there was a point where we had to put out the fire. But the stories were rich. There were lots of stories about people who just arrived in Bellingen, were settling in, living on intentional communities, all sorts of stories of self-sufficiency, working out how to survive, how to build houses, etc. So those were the very early days. And yeah, I am very grateful to Bridget and to Sue Grant, who came up and actually offered us some input. And in 1992, we went to the Sydney, the international conference that was held in Sydney. We all went down there. And then in 1997, we went over to Perth. Some of us went over to Perth to the international conference in Perth. So we kept in touch that way. We kept improving and increasing our skills. But yeah, it was a pretty wild ride in the beginning.
Thank you, Persia. I just want to check if Bev have a technical problem, or because I don't see her. Is she here? Or Dam, if you can say just it's only me, I don't see her.
That is here, just was not
okay.
highlighted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So, Bev, what about your region and the development and the early performances and trainings?
Well, we had this original 4-day workshop and then one more 2-day workshop, and I was really wanting to do playback. It really spoke to me. I was very interested in what really brings people together, what creates community, and I was on a bit of a search for methods that might assist that. That was my interest in psychodrama at the beginning, and then in playback. So I wanted to do it, and I looked around and I was wanting someone else to do it, to start a group, but there was no one on the horizon. So I thought, well, if I want to do it, I'm going to have to start something. So I gathered together some people who seemed interested and just began working with what we'd learned. When I think about anything that's available now, I can be filled with envy, but we just worked little by little, and we worked for about a year, not just in rehearsals, which was great fun and really interesting, and then we started to do a few performances, which was completely nerve-wracking and but thrilling, and there was a great response. Surprisingly, a lot of interest. So I think at that time in New Zealand there were some theatres, sort of conservative theatres, that had closed down, and there were a lot of people who were really looking for a theatre that was more relevant, that was more meaningful, that had more built more connection with the audiences, and playback seemed to meet that need in both in Wellington, in Auckland, and in Christchurch. Companies started. I think it was something of the appeal was that it was very immediate. It was based on our stories, not sort of stories from the stars or other people's stories. It could be grounded in our own lives. And I think in New Zealand there was a great hunger to see something of our own lives reflected in art forms. So, yeah.
Well, it's really exciting to hear it from both of you, because maybe many people that are watching now, as me, many times explained playback theater history and many times mentioned 80s and Australia and New Zealand. And now it's really exciting, really, to hear all these stories from you. And what are the key changes you observed in your local playback theater communities in practice, values, or structures during the years? Bev?
I think the companies in the main centres, they had quite strong leadership in the original years, and when those leaders moved away, so I'd been myself when I worked in Wellington, Sydney, and then Wellington again. After 15 years of Monday night rehearsals, I decided I needed a little rest from that, and I was interested to explore more project work. It was very challenging. You know, I took a lot of care to make sure that the company was resourced enough to carry on, but it got very wobbly. And I think in Auckland and Christchurch as well, when that first generation of leaders left, there was a lot of challenge to just have confidence to keep going. And in Wellington, the company kept going till about 2020 with a gap around COVID. In Auckland, there's a small company that's working sometimes, but not very active. And in the South Island, the companies there in Dunedin and Christchurch haven't been active for quite some time. So there's very little playback being done in company life, although some people are taking what they learned and applying it in different settings, or an occasion happens and someone's looking for someone to do some playback and different people get invited in to do that. But when I look and hear stories from different parts of the world, in New Zealand at the moment, it's a real ebb of not many people doing playback.
And Persia?
Well, our company that began in 89 has been going now continuously since then. So it's 35 years. And there have been many, many changes. One outstanding change is our relationship to time. In those early years when we had a rehearsal, we spent all Thursday morning rehearsing, then we had lunch together, and then we had a meeting. There was time. Somehow there was time. There were no mobile phones or emails, so decisions were made from one week to the next, and then somehow they were acted upon. It was a very different culture of playback to what we do now. And there were, like, you didn't book online or anything like that. It was all very simple, posters up around town. It was a much simpler process, launching or producing a gig, as it were. In those 35 years, we've done 260 something performances. So that's averaging about 80 a year. There were some years that were a bit light on and other years that were more full on. But in the 90s, I remember a lot of abundance around commissioned performances. And for us, that meant bookings from largely government organisations, because there's not a lot of corporate activity up in this region, especially in Bellingen. But there was a lot of opportunity for grants. We had a grant of 20 shows to go up and down the coast with the theme of families in the 90s. We had a grant to do 8 shows in schools, working on the theme of healthy lifestyles for teenagers. This is all in the 90s. We went out to Moree, 4 hours away, and we did a project out there for Indigenous women, and I stayed on and ran a 3-day training group for TAFE, Indigenous TAFE students there. We went out to Tamworth, 3 hours in the opposite direction, and although still west, and we did a series over 3 days of 6 shows in a great giant marquee for high school students, 6 different high schools, on the theme of road safety. That these distances that a lot of these kids were traveling were very long. There were a lot of accidents because, young drivers, etc. So there were police, community workers, and that was all funded. That kind of funding, it didn't happen much beyond sort of 2004, 2005. That has really changed for our company. It's also changed a bit because we had a bit of a dip in membership in those years, and so there wasn't the personnel to be able to generate the grants and generate the performances. We ran pretty close to the wire there. There was 1 year where we went to 4 members, and we had been 12 members, 14 members at one point. And so, when that happened, there was a bit of a dip in our work. It's been growing again lately. We're back up to 11 members now, which is terrific. And recently we have had grant money coming through again. The other thing that's changed in those years in Bellingen is the culture of the township, because as I mentioned, in those early years, it was more stories about the early settlers in the farming communities versus the so-called hippies. There was a bit of argy-bargy happening there, and there were some stories about integrating the new people into the community. Those stories have changed radically. A lot of those people living on intentional communities have now become elders in the community and are seen as very pioneering new self-sufficiency models, etc. So the generational change has been something that we've witnessed in our company. And the new people who've come to town tend to be more digitally oriented in their work base, often creatives or people who are working within a home-based income. Still a lot of artists and musicians, but also quite a lot of tourism, which has changed the nature of the town. So lately we've had stories about the impact of tourism on the town and the broader valley and the seashore and the mountains up in Dorrigo. Areas almost being loved to death, stories about the impact of tourism, but also, of course, the benefits of tourism to the local economy. A lot of new businesses have sprung up. The other thing that's changed is there's been more focus since the advent of climate change of disasters, natural disasters. So, for example, in 2019, there was major bushfires in the region. And so out of grants from the government to do with resilience of communities, that there have been playback performances, one up in Dundarabin, a community nearby who were very badly affected by the fires. So grants linked to community resilience. And there's also been a lot of social activism in this area around forest protection, because we are surrounded by forests. It's the most exquisitely beautiful area if anyone ever visit. But we have a beautiful natural environment, but there has been a lot of concern about excess logging and illegal logging. And so there have been, for example, we did a show last year for the forest, what we call the forest protectors. It was a small performance where we just gathered those people who'd, some of them been working as social activists for 30 plus years, and did a
Yes.
show just to celebrate and nurture their work. And lately
Wow.
there has been more, I feel like, a revival of community coming together in Bellingen. We've been doing shows the last 2 years and again this year for a Toronto festival, which is a music festival along themes of community, and last year's theme was belonging. So we've been plugging in a lot more to local events, local businesses, local festivals, that sort of thing.
That's great.
Yeah,
And
so it's been huge changes that we've seen. Yeah.
yes, it's really interesting. And Bev, do you see some unique cultural, societal characteristics in your region that have shaped the way playback theater is practiced there?
I don't think, because there's so little playback happening sort of over this last while, it's nothing that stands out. I think some time ago, there was a Maori women's group who started doing some playback theatre, and they brought some of their traditional movement song into the way they did playback. It was a fairly short-lived company, but that was pretty exciting to see them take up playback, and we're all pretty interested in what they were doing. The leadership sort of fell away, so they didn't carry on. But I think generally Māori culture has infused New Zealand culture in a very strong way. So framing up a performance is very likely to be have elements of Māori custom tikanga. So beginnings and endings of things held by a traditional Māori frame would be quite common. The actual playback itself, not so much, although some Māori language, Pacific Island languages would come in, but pretty much the form stayed pretty much the same, and these influences could come up through the enactments, but it didn't change the form so much. Yeah.
I see. And what about the ethical playback practice as you see it today, and how is shifted through the years, and how do you understand ethical playback practice now?
Because I haven't been involved in more immediate events, although I'm aware of them and feel the challenges of different political views and different stances when across the international community. So I'm not so involved in that. When I was thinking about ethics, one thing that came to mind was that there was a period, maybe, when was it? 2005, 2006, around that time, where I began to feel that the freedom of the teller's chair was not as free as it could be, that there was judgment coming in of the teller and the story, some political correctness coming in, that certain stories were good, others not so good. That was a time where I felt that some of the foundation ethics of playback were coming a little bit wobbly. I haven't seen that continue so much, so that's a big relief for me, but it's something that I have fought for in my own practice, and wanted to encourage that we keep the teller's chair as free as we can keep it, and that different people will have different stories, and it will challenge us to listen, to really listen to those stories when we don't agree with some of the values that are underpinning the story, or we've got very different values ourselves. I'd say that's a very strong challenge for all of us. So, yeah. And the willingness for everybody to stay engaged, to stay in the room. If we get in the room with people who are so different from us, I'd say that's an edge that we're all working with in playback, but in our communities as well, and in the international community. So the polarization is really a force to be worked with, and it's going to show up in playback. Playback's doesn't live on a different planet. We're all in this together.
Yes, and Persia, do you want to say something about the ethics?
Yeah, I'm very much in alignment with what Bev just expressed, and clearly that's something that's being explored, and it's a confronting world now in so many ways, in order for the teller's chair to be free, and there's a whole different thing going on in our world to what there was when we were beginning. Well, I speak for myself, when we were beginning playback. Obviously there were differences, but it's on a different scale now, and the international playback community is clearly right in the center of a lot of that. Not so much here in Australia, although there are obviously differences. One thing I want to pick up on around ethics is the idea too that playback isn't just entertainment, like it's not theatre sports. It's not just for fun. I think we need to hold on to the idea that it's a community ritual of storytelling. And along the lines of what you said, Bev, about the teller's chair being free, I think it's also important to recognise the courage of the teller and the honouring of their courage in stepping forward, in sharing their story and offering their story, because we are drawing on that ancient tradition of oral storytelling and the power of that to, at its best, to transform and to hold community and to become a ritual that is in some ways magical, but some would say sacred. And I think that's really an important dimension of playback that it's important not to lose. In terms of social activism, I feel like, yes, we've explored that a lot, probably because of our link to the natural environment in Bellingen. That's been certainly, there have been shows that have focused on social activism in other ways, like domestic violence forums or whatever that we've performed for. But I think one of the standouts for me in the world at the moment, and I think it does relate to playback, is that one of the most compelling stories that we need to engage with in terms of social activism is the story of how we are actually destroying our earth. And while there are lots of stories told about rescuing the earth or saving the earth or defending environmental groups or, you know, anti this, anti that, there's still that sense, I think, that these performances that are conducted along these lines are still in some way othering us from the earth, from nature and from the story of nature. And in my reflections personally, and this maybe doesn't apply to other people, I don't know, but it's just my very personal feeling about this, is that if we're to if we're to be socially engaged in freeing up the voice of the Earth's story, the ability of the Earth's story to be heard, it needs to be done from a place where we're connected to the Earth, where we're not just speaking as agents who are interacting with the Earth, separate from it. And so certainly in training and also in our day-to-day lives, it seems as playbackers, it's really important that we do practices that are realigning ourselves, our bodies, day to day with nature, reconnecting to the natural world, so that when we do hear a story about these things that are happening to our earth, or where we are playing back a story, that we're able to do it as part of nature, from within nature, not seeing ourselves as separate to nature. So as actors, for example, it asks of us a very deep embodied surrender to our work in acting or music. And as story conductors, listening, it involves, and actors, of course, and musicians listening. But as listeners, it seems to me to ask us as social activists to be able to hear the messages that are coming from the earth. So, for example, if we're having a performance and there's a huge storm outside, that somehow that voice becomes incorporated into the moment of the performance, that we're starting to not see ourselves as walled off, but we're trying to open our bodies and our hearts and our minds to being much more connected to the natural world.
Yes,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's really interesting. I think that all of us think about that, and we are part of this nature. And I see both your passion about playback and how do you sustain presence and fresh in a long-term practice? How do you keep that passion that you still have in you?
Well, I guess there's lots of things that we do in our group. One is telling our own stories, as Bev referred to before, that sense of being willing to share and be honest, staying in touch with our local community and beyond in terms of what's relevant, keeping ourselves relevant, linking to the broader playback theatre community. So in March, several of us went down to Stanwell Tops to be part of the gathering, the Australasian gathering down there. Other members have done other things where they've interacted with people from other groups. I think also the idea that we use skills in our local community to enrich our practice. So putting a really strong, clear focus on our artistic development, not letting that just slide or atrophy, but keeping fresh impulses. Each person in the company working with their edges, with their with the places they feel they need to grow and develop, and being honest about that. And the other thing would be being open and honest about group process, trying to stay across that, whether it's resolving tensions between people one-on-one, or there have been occasions when we've had people come in and work with us to create resolutions where there have been difficulties. So there's a lot to it, and it playback has really changed me, all those years of doing it, because of the personal growth that you mentioned before, Bev, about how enriching it was to do those rehearsals. That sort of, it doesn't stop. It keeps going. Like, it doesn't really, each time you're stepping into the unknown, you're risking being alive, and vulnerable to each other. So it's growthful, but yeah, you have to keep saying
Yeah.
yes.
Yes. And
I
Bev, for
suppose.
you? Yes.
I think after 15 years in a company, then I was interested in doing some projects, and I started doing more training. I think in playback, I've always found something like a new angle to investigate for myself. I mean, traveling and training people is inordinately enriching, and I've learned so much, and it's a great privilege to travel in that way and be invited into a different culture through people being willing to tell stories. So that's been extremely stimulating for me and challenging. Um, and then I've been interested in sort of particularly looking at a playback event when people are telling stories from their own community or from their own lives, that through the telling of the stories, a community is having a conversation about a social, cultural, or political matter that's of importance to them. So I've been very interested in looking at this, what I call the sociodramatic elements in the personal story. So having those present, and then developing a bit of a process where having some stories told, listening, having the audience reflect on the themes that might be emerging, and then thinking, well, if we're having a conversation with each other about the stories, what are we talking, what's matter, what are we seeing is important to us at this time in this community, and then more intentionally focusing on some stories. So that's been a big exploration for me in my practice. But then getting involved in a project that's countering online racism, training people in listening as a way of creating social change through listening. So that's been a very interesting application of what I've learned in playback, but in a different setting. Yeah, I've been working with someone who's doing some community development projects, and looking at how we might complement that using some playback theatre. So training some people briefly, training people from the community, and then having them perform for the community. So getting back to the idea of citizens actor, which is an idea that I've loved from the very beginning, the citizen actor. So less focused on big performances with an artistic quality, but working with people from a community who can then perform for that community. So recently someone asked me if I would do a playback event with a focus group for a PhD thesis. So we gathered a small group, and so I'm interested in these little collaborations, where playback can be used. So changing the focus, investigating some things for myself, following threads of interest. That's what's kept me alive. And I've you know, it's deceptively simple, this form, playback theatre. It seems like it's very simple, but actually the complexity of it has kept me engaged for all these 44 years, 45 years that I've been doing playback. So there's plenty in it for me, and I'm sure for other people who are listening. Yeah, it's
Yes,
really,
thank you both.
really
And
interesting.
now we'll go into breakout rooms for 15 minutes, and please present yourself in your group, get to know each other, and share your thoughts now about what you're hearing or your inspiration, or maybe your questions. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. And when we come back, we also will ask if there are other Australia and New Zealand region people, playbackers here. So maybe we'll hear also from them after the breakout rooms. But now, please enjoy and see you in 15 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. So we continue with the interview First Generation Speaks from our 50-year celebration year 50 years of playback theater we celebrate now in 2025, and we are happy to be here with Bev Hosking and Persia Wildwood. And now you came back after you encounter with some playbackers, and we'll be happy in a minute to hear from you. But before that, I want to ask something that I'm really interested in, and maybe other playbackers also are wondering: how can we support more the playback theater in your region, and what are the biggest difficulties that you encounter in your regions nowadays developing and practicing playback theater?
The main difficulty for us is to do with distance, really. Our capacity to do performances that are beyond our immediate region is more limited because of travel and expensive travel, and also drawing members. We have a small pool of people we draw our membership from, our recruitment. And one thing that has been wonderful, we had Wingham playback down the road a couple of hours for a while, and there was for 20 years Cape Byron Playback Theatre, and that was great because, so I would encourage those of you in the audience who perhaps are in areas surrounding where we are in Bellingen to think about creating companies that we can link in with. And the other thing would be rural companies in Europe or other parts of the world that are operating in non-city based areas would be excellent. The Australasian group that hosted the Stanwell Tops gathering has been really useful. I've been attending those online meetings, and that's been great for plugging us in to the other Australian companies and New Zealand. But I think on the whole, we still remain quite cut off from the rest of the world, except for people who travel and go to the conferences, and they do bring things back. But yeah, there are difficulties, but I would really encourage other regional groups to contact us, rural-based groups or groups that aren't city-based. And
Yes,
also people from the city, if you want a holiday in Bellingen, come and play with us. Roberto did such a thing, and we have had other people come and visit. Yeah, that's always good.
yeah. And Bev?
I don't particularly relate to the difficulty in the region. I think this is at the moment in New Zealand, it's fallow. People aren't doing playback much apart from the odd performance. But I think at some point that will spark up again, and there'll be there'll be groups that form. I think one thing I've thought about playback since I started, you need to have a lot of spare time or time available to do performances, and you also need to have some way of supporting yourself. You need a private income or some way that you can support yourself, because in New Zealand, people have never been able to support themselves through doing playback. We get some, the funding of the arts and even community development projects is pretty thin. So really, it's a voluntary engagement. And with the stresses of life at the moment in New Zealand and probably everywhere, people don't have that discretionary time or money to be able to engage or to make such a commitment that playback requires. So, I mean, I think that's not something that can be helped from the outside. I think it's just a timing thing in New Zealand. And post-COVID, people, I think, have withdrawn somewhat, and group activities are less attractive. People, something of the isolation that occurred around COVID has got a tail to it, and so group activity is less on people's radar. So I think that's a phenomenon that we're all grappling with, how to come back out. Yeah. But one thing, just I travelled a bit the last few years, really, when I've seen a difficulty I've seen sort of as a trainer, but is the loss of the story form in playback. So I noticed that on the playback stage, the narrative of the story is, I haven't seen it enacted very much, not very much relationship between people on the stage in terms of roles or characters. So a lot of expression out to the audience, but not really scenes that have got interaction between, one person in the story with another story. So slightly more abstracted. And I think doing a playback story is really difficult. It's really complex, and I'm wondering whether people have given up trying to do them, or there's a lot of different forms, but that the story form seems to have slightly disappeared from view. And that's a big surprise to me, and it's a bit of a disappointment to me. And I'm thinking, as a trainer, how do we get back to training people to do stories, to daring to do stories again? But
Yes, it's great that you mentioned that, because in the interview with Joe Salus, we spoke about that a lot, and it is important for us all to speak about that. I totally agree with you and with Joe that it's really important, but of course we need to train, because this is the hardest part. And recently I had the pleasure to be with two playbackers from your region. With Johnny Jablonka, we were in Cuba, and Jerry Orkin was a guest in our Bulgarian Playback Theatre gathering this year, and also made a master class about stories. And I'm really happy to invite them now on the stage if they're here. And also, please, other playbackers from the region, from Australia, New Zealand, please come and say, maybe come, it's Dami, need to help with that, maybe to highlight you, maybe you give us a sign. So you can join us here and say your name, your place that you practice from, and maybe a few words about your practice, or the way you see the practice in Australia or New Zealand these days. Yes, please.
Well, thanks, Tzveta. It was lovely to be with you in Bulgaria. You asked very big questions. I'm not sure that even in the short time we have available that we can even address them adequately. But I guess I think one thing that might be interesting for people to do is to pop onto the Sydney Playback Theatre website. Michael Pooley, who I think is also on this call, created a great history of playback theatre in Australia and New Zealand. Video interviews with Jonathan and Joe, a lot of archive material that people, I think, could get a lot of pleasure from watching. Kind of as I will say this one thing about Australasian or Australian playback. I can't really speak for New Zealand playback. I do notice that we're that playback, like our animals and our plant species, has evolved a little differently here compared to elsewhere in the world. We do seem to be a little bit more physical in our playback. We do seem to be a little funnier in our playback. Not theatre sports funny, but we can use humour to good effect in honouring people's stories. And we do seem to more willing to take more risks. It feels that playback here is a little bit edgier than what I observe around the world. And, you know, if we've made any contribution to playback, maybe those three things, maybe it comprises those three things. And I'd be interesting to hear from other Australians who hear their opinion.
Yeah, please come. And Jerry, can you put please in the chat the link to the site you mentioned? So to be easier for the people to, if possible. If not, we'll find a way.
Sure.
So,
Michael is here. Maybe he can put the
please,
chat in
Michael,
since
please join us.
he
Please,
created the video.
please join us.
Yeah, look, I've just put a link in there. Unfortunately, the videos focus a little bit more on Australia. I haven't yet had the chance to bring Bev into that. But yeah, look, I've just put some links there. And I think just echoing what Jerry said around the physicality, I think it's always something. I've had some conversations with Jonathan about both the pluses and the challenges of more physical playback. So yeah, that's an ongoing conversation, I think. But it's lovely to see you and hear, Bev. I'm thankful to Bev. It was her phone call that invited me to join the Sydney company way back, and yeah, I've been in and out of Sydney playback, but I'm still involved there, and was lucky enough to be involved in the gathering, in organising with Jerry and many others, the gathering that we had that Persia talked about. And like any gathering where you get people together, there's such an energy. There was lots of struggle, of course, around how to do this form we love. But yeah, it was a lovely a lovely few days of working together. And as I think Persia said, one of the challenges for us is distance. It's just we are quite a long way away from each other. So any chance to get together, we really value.
In which city do you practice?
In Sydney.
You're in Sydney.
So I'm a member of Sydney Playback, yeah.
And how many years?
Well, Bev's phone call came in 1987, so I've been involved since then, but in and out. So when I had young children, it was difficult to give the focus it needs, and so I took quite a long time out. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. Is there another person you see here to name? Because I don't know your peers another Australian or New Zealander that can join us now? So please.
I think Johnny's on the call, so maybe we can hear from him.
Or Susan Grant, Sue Grant.
Oh, is Sue
Yeah.
on? Oh, great.
I was going to point to Sue.
Yeah, please, one of you come first and then the other.
Let's hear from Johnny because he's still in a company and I'm not.
Okay, Johnny, please.
So I think it's worth for people watching, and thank you, Bev and Persia, for the wonderful stories. I really enjoyed hearing that and hearing about the early days. I started playback only in 1997, so a little bit later than that. Our company was formed by someone who moved from Sydney to Darwin, which is in the very north of Australia. And to give people watching a perspective, where I practice playback is 4,500 kilometers from where Michael practices playback. The closest company to us is in Brisbane, maybe. Actually, I think Michael Cheng, I think you're the closest company to our city in Singapore. So this is a vast place, and we're so far from New Zealand. Perth is even further. So it's really hard to talk even about one region. But I think that question of how do we connect with the rest of the world has been on, something I've been asking the last few years and trying to find ways to do it. And I've been very lucky to have the privilege to travel and to connect with other people. And we've also tried to bring people to us here in our small city. And I think that's part of it. And then also try and matchmake and connect people up in other places. So I just wanted to, again, just thank all the teachers and all the people who built playback. Sue Grant was one of my teachers many years ago. And Michael and Jerry who built playback up in this region and created that sort of foundation for us to keep working in.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Yes, Susan.
You're making me sad that I haven't been doing playback. So I have to say I feel very privileged and lucky to have started my playback journey in 1986, 87 and learnt from Bev and Bridget and Francis and Jonathan and Mary Good and Deborah and all the that very, very rich and fertile time. And I was in Sydney playback for many years. But yeah, Bev, picking up on, what you said, I just never made enough money as I was getting older, I just needed to start being able to support myself in a more sustainable way. So I went back towards a professional life. And it was difficult to sustain my playback practice at the same time. But I also moved out away from Sydney to Central Australia. And I never found the way. Central Australia, Alice Springs is in the very middle of Australia, and it's a very long, again, the distance theme, it's a very long, long way away. And I think for me, it was the distance as well as the need to have a professional working life that meant that I didn't sustain my playback practice consistently in Central Australia, although I did come back and keep running summer schools in Sydney and teaching. And Bev came out to Alice Springs and did some workshops out there. So we did try, but we never formed a company. But one thing I just wanted to, add to what we've said was the incredible richness that psychodrama training added to. I was a conductor primarily, and I just really did want to highlight the value of that really solid training in group process and how important that was for me as a conductor and how much I think it adds value to the practice of playback. And I don't really know where that sits anymore with playback community as it currently is. I'm not really up to date. So, but it's a great pleasure to be here with you all.
Yeah, thank you, Susan, so much. And now I want to invite Claire. She can speak about New Zealand, so it will be a pleasure for us to hear a few words from you, Claire.
Thank you so much. I joined Playback with Dunedin Playback Theatre Company in 2002, and I actually did a few workshops with Bev way back then, and then I playbacked my way up through New Zealand, made my way to Wellington after attending my very first international playback gathering in Wellington. And I just want to highlight what a privilege that was. That was the very first time I got to meet people who were passionate about playback theatre, who came from all over the world to New Zealand, and it made playback accessible to me. It was hosted by Bev Hosking and Christian Penny, and it made such a significant difference to my ability to practice the work, to have that intense workshop over that period of time. And I just came back time and time again for the next few years, and it's paid off years and years and years and years later. And I just have to say, it has enriched these relationships into many deep, deep relationships through the playback family all these years later. And it all started all those years ago. And it just reminded me how much value there is to be had in live, connective experiences where you really get to go deep into the work. And it's of deep value. And, I would really just celebrate that time of being together, and want to have deep thanks to Bev for creating that work with Christian. And it was such a big effort to come back then, because I was so starry-eyed at the start about playback and what it was, but it was life-changing, significantly life-changing back then. And now I get to be a part of this network with Jerry and Michael, facilitate the Australasia Playback Theatre Network, and be a part of doing this amazing work with my Australasian buddies. So very, very thrilled to do that. And in the meantime, I just do passion playback projects myself, but very much like Sue, kind of stepped back a little bit, felt a bit of burnout because there is no money and it's really hard to sustain creativity. So yeah, it's a really tough situation. What do you do? But you do it for the love of it, for company life, for the creativity, for all those social stories and the connections. So I think the love of it will always sing out louder than anything else.
Yeah, thank you, Claire, so much. It's
I
really
just wanted, Tzveta, I'm sorry, but I just really want to mention Peter Hall as well, because I don't think his name's been mentioned yet. And he was also just such a key teacher. He took over Drama Action Centre when Bridget left. And he has taught so many people, and he was the most magnificent actor and conductor and an absolute stalwart of Sydney Playback Theatre for many, many years. So I really just wanted to say his name out loud and to pay my respects to him as a playback elder as well.
Yeah.
Yes, that's great. Is there other names now you all from the region can recall, because it is important for these names to be heard and to stay in this recording also. So please, if you remember anything else, a person or a story maybe that's important to stay, please share it now.
I think
And Charlie Christian, who has been who was my host in Sydney Playback Theatre years back, and she was amazing storyteller, lovely teacher, and she is leaving this life very soon. So that is very painful. But I want her also to be remembered in playback, even though she then chose storytelling and other creative arts more than playback theatre.
Can you say the name again, please? Because in the beginning there was some noise.
Okay, Charlie Kristen or Richarda Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you, Päivi.
I think Martin Sutcliffe, he was a key person in starting Auckland Playback Theatre, and Godfrey Sim, he was starting Christchurch Playback Theatre. Sandra Turner started Dunedin Playback Theatre. So these are all people in New Zealand who are known to each other, but probably not known outside New Zealand much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now I will open our stage for questions. So please, all of you that are here, now you have a possibility live to contact and connect to Bev and Persia. So please, now you can put your microphone on and to ask your question. So this would be this moment for your questions. If there is no a question now, maybe later, give me a sign. I see a question. Okay, Johnny.
I have a question, Persia, which I asked Michelle when we were in the breakout, but I'm going to ask you, what sustained you for 35 years individually and your amazing Bellingen Playback Company? Through all those cultural changes that you described so well and you articulated so much of how the world is changing around you, what has sustained you?
Wow. Yeah, it hasn't been a smooth ride, but I would say that the community of Bellingen has been a big part of sustaining me, and the friendships that I have formed within the company and beyond have become part of the fabric of my life. So playback has been integral to my family structure, really, or at least my community structure. And the issue of money has definitely been there for me over all these years, personally. And I've had to do a lot of other things to sustain my commitment to playback by working around the edges with a lot of other things. I think the other thing, Johnny, that sustains me is just the joy of what happens when a story is played back and a teller has been met in their vulnerability. The story has been transformed and given to the teller and given to the whole audience in a way that is quite mystical. And to me, playback has that quality. And in Egyptian music, there's a word called tarab, it refers to the quality of energy between an audience and a musician. And it's that in training people and in performances, there's something about that quality of what happens in the room and beyond when those moments happen. And I've done a lot of training of I've done about 5 lots of classes and over years and years, and watching people come through pleasure in their own bodies to deep impulses, whether they are training in playback theatre, whether they are audience members who are somehow bringing some deep impulse forward to be shared, to be honoured, to be transformed into theatre on the spot. There's a magic in that is quite compelling. Yeah. And
Yes.
yeah, I love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
Bev, what do you imagine for the next 10 or 20 years about playback theater and how it could look like in your region?
No idea. I imagine some of the little sparks might get going again. I really can't tell. Yeah, I really don't have much of a picture of what might emerge.
Mm.
What I do know is that it's important that we keep meeting face to face in groups,
Yeah.
telling
Yeah.
stories. I think that's very important. But where the initiative is going to come from, it's not clear to me at the moment. We need some young people to rise up and bring this about.
I see. And Persia?
I guess if you're asking about what we wish for it here
Yes.
in Australasian region, I think we're doing pretty well, really. And, you know, as Bev just said, things do come for a time and then fizzle away a bit. And I think when we are less connected with the broader playback world, that is something that happens because we are a long way from other parts of the world. But I would like to pick up on something that Jerry and Michael mentioned about Australian playback being very physical. And this probably comes from, and relates also to what sustains me, is the fact that our stories here are often we came from a sort of dance music tradition, our company, and that sense of movement and physicality is very strong in our company. And I'd like to just mention a story that highlights the humor that Jerry mentioned. It was, and also the ongoing discussion between Jonathan and Michael about physicality. It was a story in a show called Umbilicus, and a woman told a story of her having an umbilical cord that she was hanging from a clothesline to dry in her garden, and she was going to make a necklace or a bracelet, I can't remember what it was, out of this umbilical cord. And kookaburras were swooping, attacking the cord, wanting to eat it, of course. And the woman rushed out and saved the cord. And I remember the teller's actor, who is actually in the room tonight, one of our still current members, Michelle Balhari, who at one stage was actually skipping with the umbilical cord as a sort of way of telling the story. Now, if that's not Australian, what is? I think it was just a fabulous story. It stays with me all these years later. That was way back in 2011 or somewhere back there. But the image of that woman Michelle on stage, skipping with an umbilical cord, saving it from the magpies and the kookaburras, is somehow very iconically Australian. And I do think we do humour very well. So, yeah, that's all. Good on
Yes,
us.
and Johnny is saying that for us that don't know what a kookaburra is, this is a kind of bird. So yeah, because I was also wondering, and what blessing or a wish you both would have for the global playback theater community as we celebrate 50 years, half century of playback theater, but we hope there will be many, many more. So what would you wish for the global community? Bev?
I think for me, that we continue to really listen to each other, and particularly we make space to for people who've got different stories, different values, to come to the teller's chair, and that we work with our own resistances to listening to people who are really different from us. That takes courage and a certain commitment, but in that sense, I feel like just to keep the teller's chair open and free for everybody to sit and tell their stories. I think that's what I would wish.
Yeah, thank you. And Persia?
I'd like to just acknowledge that the broader playback community, and this is a year of celebration, and I really want to affirm that celebration quality that's there in the room tonight, and I feel that I will really want to honor Jonathan and Joe Salas because of the enormous contribution they've made over so many years, and you too, Bev, and lots of people here in Australia and in New Zealand. I'd also like to acknowledge my own company, because a lot of those people, I haven't done this on my own. There's people in our company who've been there 27 years, 20 years, like, you know, and especially the Deborah Ryan, who actually was one of the co-founders of Playback. She's not able to be here tonight, but I do want to acknowledge her. And in terms of a wish, I would wish that playback theatre becomes a type of theatre that when you mention that you do it, or that you've been to a playback performance, that people don't glaze over, that they actually know what it is, you know, that it's become understood more, because it is such a valuable and beautiful theatre form. That would be one of my big wishes, and that it grows and continues and flourishes. Yeah.
Let it be.
And thank you, Tzveta, for all of you and your team for tonight, and for all this celebration year. It's fantastic what your team and you yourself are doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And before I say the closing words, I would like to give the space to some of you that are present here. If you want to say something or acknowledge something that it's important to be said here and now, and to stay recorded, please do it now, before I will say the final words of what will come next, and what to expect until the end of the year. But please say something if you want to say. I see in the chat, Johnny is saying a shout out to Jen and Sarah, who are both here, both long-time playbackers in Australia. So, Aviva, come please.
Thank you for seeing. I want to acknowledge the Australian, I heard you during, I remember the conference in Australia, in Perth. What year was it? I think it was 1997. It was a changing mode in playback. I think since then, I know that it has an enormous influence on me, and I became one of the world teachers, and it started there. And I know there are others here. I know Päivi and others that started. I think that from Australia, it came to Europe and to East Europe, and it developed. So and I remember some of my big teachers were from Australia, and I remember I want to contribute now. There are two Robins, Robin Beth and another Robin, that were kind of very important
Robin
persons. Yeah, so there were so many things that started from Australia and had such a big influence in what's going on now in the world of playback. So thank you. And
Yeah,
Bev was also my teacher, so.
yeah,
And
thank you. Yes.
I would like to acknowledge Frances Batten, who brought particularly playback up to Brisbane Playback Theatre Company. I'm no longer with Brisbane Playback. I'm with another company called Red Thread Stories, but Frances was my trainer and trained so many people in Queensland, in Brisbane, and through his teaching, playback developed. And to thank you also, Bev, for your teaching as well over the years.
Thank you, Jen.
And one last thing, I just want to mention my dear colleague and musician, Chris, who's no longer with us.
Thank you. And also we'll mention Crystal Wecker. I hope I say it right. And Heather Robb. The names are mentioned in the chat. And also Carrie and Evelyn, long time playbackers in the region. This is from Michael.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Now we continue every 19th of the month. It's easy to remember, each 19th. Until November, we have these amazing meetings with founders and developers of playback theater. The hour will be different, so please check the hour, because it will be different hour every time, but every time will be 19th. So 19th of July, we will meet with Kayo Munakata from Japan. So this will be amazing pleasure. This is next month. Aviva, who spoke before, will be with her in 19th of August. Then we continue every 19th with Päivi Rahmel from Finland, Karin Gisler presenting German-speaking countries, Ben Rivers, Farah Wardani, Sulinda Kash presenting Arab-speaking countries, Leslie Palmer, Samson Setumo, Hati Barowski from Africa. And then we have our big birthday party. I hope you all will be there. There will be dancing and playback and some history of playback theater and many, many nice things. It will be 10th of November, so we have our huge birthday party there. It is the month of the first playback theater rehearsal. That's why we do it in November. So this is the month that we celebrate 50 years of playback theater. And many thanks to Bea Somuji from Hungary and Damilola Putieri from Nigeria from perfect technical support. And of course, many thanks to all the board of Center for Playback Theater. There are many people working for all of us, and there are a lot of work that have not been seen, but it's there, and it's an engine working all the time. So of course, to our partners of our International Playback Theater Network, many thanks. There are many people working there too for all of us in the global community. So if you want to support Center for Playback Theater's work, there's in the link, there is a link in the chat, so you can support the 50-year celebrations. And thank you so much, Bev and Persia and all the other people from the region that joined us and spare your time today. It was a huge pleasure to share this time with you, and also to leave this legacy for the people to enjoy later this talk. The talk will be in YouTube, so you can all share it with your societies and people you work with. So we celebrate these 50 years of playback theater, and we honor not only the past, but we also honor the future, a future shaped by the stories we choose to hear and the communities we choose to build. So let's stay connected, let's keep listening, and let's keep growing together. I'm Tzveta Baliyska from Bulgaria, and thank you so much for all of you being here. Thank you, and bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you all.